In this video, we're going to walk through landmark regions and specifically how they work in Webflow. And you're going to see firsthand how you can access the accessibility tree, as well as I'm going to run through some voiceover stuff so you can see exactly the difference that it can make in a site when somebody is using an assisted device such as a screen reader. So the first thing that we're going to take a look at is when we're talking about landmark regions. This is a great resource, www.w3.org, and it is all about area W3 accessibility practices. And so what we just have to realize is that in Webflow, we are using the HTML elements to get a lot of these regions by default. And you'll be able to see when we dive into the Webflow project. So we use the main landmarks, which are the header or the landmark role, which is banner. We have navigation, which is our nav. We have our main, which are main content wrapper, and we have our footer, and we also have sections, and we'll see how we can use all of that. So let's jump into our Webflow project and just see where these things are in their HTML elements to begin with. So let's take a look at our Webflow project, and let's just open up the navigator panel here. And we can see our structure, just our basic regions that we're going to be dealing with, or our roles. So we have our nav bar, which I didn't know this, but the nav bar actually contains 2 landmark roles in it, just by default. So the nav bar wrapper itself, it doesn't say anything in here, but in the settings, but this is actually a header element. So that takes care of our banner role. And then we have within the nav bar, we have our nav menu. And if you go to settings and nav menu, there is a tag applied of nav, which is our landmark navigation. So just by using a Webflow nav bar, we get all of those 2 landmark roles built right in. So that takes care of that. Next, if we look at our next role, in this case, I have a secondary nav, which is the breadcrumb nav. And what you'll notice is, so I've got the actual nav here, and it's got the tag of nav. And then I've got an aria label here. Now, what an aria label does is it labels something so that accessibility devices like screen readers can understand what they are. And if you only have one navigation, it's not necessary to do this to a nav, but because we have 2, I'm actually giving this aria label of breadcrumb, and notice that I don't add anything to this. So because the way that when it's being read out in a screen reader is it's going to add navigation to it because that's the type of role it is. So it's going to read out our aria label breadcrumb, but then also navigation, which I will show you in a bit. So that takes care of that. Next, we've talked about, in our skip link video, we talked about the main wrapper. And this is our main content wrapper. And so we've given it the ID of main so that we can use the skip link to go to it. And we also have the tag of main, which gives it our main HTML element, which becomes our main landmark. And then the last main one that we have for our last big landmark is our footer. And so if we go into our footer section, we use the tag of footer, and it adds that HTML element of footer, which is our content info landmark. And so we've taken care of our landmark usage for accessibility just by using this simple dropdown that selects basically the HTML elements and their corresponding aria landmark roles. So just by doing that. So In Webflow, it makes it very easy to add these things to a page to begin with. So let's take a look at what this means for the accessibility of a page. So I'm going to go into inspect into the dev tools, and oftentimes when you're in the dev tools, it'll start up in elements, and we're in styles, but we're going to go all the way over to accessibility. And then we're going to click this enable full page accessibility tree. So this is Chrome developer tools. We're going to reload our dev tools, and then we're going to see that there's a little accessibility person here. And it says switch to accessibility tree view. So we're going to click that. And what we're going to see is that we can see all of the accessible elements that are on our page visible. So there are things that can be navigable on a page. So we've got first our first link, which is our skip to main content link. Then we have our banner or our header. We have our inside of our banner. We actually have our navigation. Then we have our second navigation. We have our main content. And then we have our content info, which is our footer. So this navigation accessibility tree is what accessible devices use to navigate through the accessible elements in a page. So quickly show you what that looks like. I'm using Narrator, which is a free voiceover or screen reader for Windows. There is VoiceOver, which is the free version built into Mac. Then you also have NVDA, which is an open source screen reader, which is a little bit more powerful than at least Narrator. I'm not familiar at all with VoiceOver, but I'm also told it's quite good. And then you have like the gold standard of screen readers, which is a paid version, and it is JAWS. So I'm going to use Narrator because it's just going to be able to show us really quickly how this works for people who are using it. So we're going to quickly turn on Narrator. One of the ways in screen readers that you can navigate a website is by going through the landmarks. So I'm going to just open up the landmarks tab here.
Scan off. Search landmarks window, search list, banner, 1 of 7, selected.
So this is telling me that there's 7 landmarks on the page. And so we have our banner.
Primary, navigation, 2 of 7, selected. Breadcrumb, navigation, 3 of 7, selected. Main, 4 of 7, selected. Test and build, region, 5 of 7, selected. Learn and explore, region, 6 of 7, selected.
Now those 2 regions are actually sections, and that's going to show you a little bit of a bonus for 2 landmark roles that require a little bit more effort into them. But we were just dealing with the main landmark roles. If you start implementing these into your Webflow sites, it's going to make it a lot more accessible right off the bat. And then, of course,
content information, footer, 7 of 7, selected.
That's our footer. So by doing this, people can actually use this tree and this landmark list to actually go to a portion of the site. So in this case, we're just going to go to the footer.
Scan, footer, content information landmark. Created by.
And then I'm able to navigate through the footer by going to this landmark. So this is what will help people quickly get to where they want to be when they're using assisted devices. So just taking this little bit of extra time really does go a long way in making your sites more accessible to all users. So in that accessibility tree and in the landmark tab there, we read out sections. And now the important thing to kind of note is we're going to go back to our documentation here. The HTML has two more HTML elements that we're going to be looking at. We're going to be looking at the aside, and we're going to be looking at the section. The important thing to note with the aside is it's complementary information that is not part of main content. So oftentimes it'd probably be something more like a sidebar with information or something like that. That's kind of an older way that it would be on, say, a WordPress site or something like that. You don't see that as much anymore, but it's designed to be outside of main content. And then it will basically be a complementary landmark role or an aside, and it will allow you to go directly to that content as well. Now the sections are a little different. So we use sections because it is best practice for using sections and whatnot. But it is important to note for accessibility, an HTML section only works for accessibility as a region when it has an accessible name using aria-labelledby or aria-label. And so that is why one of our sections didn't actually show up in our accessibility tree, if you caught that. So we actually have on this page, there's 3 sections. What you'll notice is this last section doesn't have any custom attribute associated with it at all. And the other 2 actually are being labeled by either aria-labelledby or aria-label. So the first one we're going to talk about is this section here. And this section here is controlled by aria-labelledby. Aria-labelledby is another element that is on the page that is basically labeling what this section is. Now, aria-labelledby is really handy for these sections when we are applying it to a heading or something like that, where the content can change. Somebody wants to change the copywriting and they change the content, and then that will automatically change the section name to be whatever in the accessibility tree. And so the way that works is we've got it tied to this H1 heading. It can be tied to any element. It can be tied to text element, whatever. It does not have to be an H1, but oftentimes when we're navigating a site, without any assistive devices, we're navigating it by the heading hierarchy and stuff like that. So, it makes sense to use something like the heading to do that. But yes, you can use any other text. What you need to do to that element is you need to give it an ID. And so in this case, really original, I've got it labeled here section 1. And then I go back to the section. And so if we go back to the section for this example, it's aria-labelledby, and it's aria-labelledby section 1. So whatever is in this heading is going to be getting read out like region and the name of the region. And so that is how somebody with assisted device could just go to this section right off the bat. And again, you could go to the content of this section from that accessibility tree. Another thing to note with this, what I was reading, is aria-labelledby is really handy if, for instance, you are more concerned about translation or things like that, because aria-labelledby pulls the text from whatever the text block that you are filling in. And so if that text block changes with any kind of translation service, then that will change in your accessibility tree. However, if we use this next method, it doesn't change the language. So if that's a concern for you, and you want to be starting to apply this to your sections, you might want to be using aria-labelledby. The only thing you need to know is that you kind of have the 2 steps there. You have to add your ID, and then you can match that ID to the aria-labelledby. The other way of labeling something is we do this for links and different things like that, is we use aria-label. And so aria-label is literally whatever the text is in this value. So this aria-label would be learn and explore, not based on what this heading is, but based on what this value is. So it would be learn region, learn and explore. And then you would notice that this last one doesn't have it. So we currently don't have anything. So if we wanted to just do this real quick, what we're going to do is we're just going to add this, and we're going to add an aria label. I guess it's caps lock because of the screen reader uses caps lock as the screen reader control. And so we've got an aria label, and let's just do qualify and ship. But literally, it could be whatever we wanted. It doesn't have to be that again. And we often use that for, say, links or something like that. We'll use an aria label. The very last, I guess we could call it bonus, is we're going to talk about that aside. So I've actually hidden it for right now. I don't have it done anywhere fancy. What you'll just notice is that it does not, let's just collapse all this. It is outside of the main wrapper. So it understands that it's complementary. Again, you can use an aria label if you want to label it, but it actually recognizes it as complementary as an aside. Without that, it just won't tell you what it necessarily is, I don't think. But it just says that it's, complementary content, and you can travel the accessibility tree and use the screen reader to get to that as well. So if we'd kind of let's just quickly take a look at it again using our screen reader, and then wrap this up.
And build Google Chrome. Scan off. Search landmarks window. Search list. Banner 1 of 9 selected.
So you can see here that we now have all of our landmarks. And if we go into
test and build region 5 of 9 selected.
We want this region.
Scan. Test and build region landmark.
It's going to take us directly to that landmark. The other thing to note is that when you're going through landmarks, it's one button to be able to jump to the next landmark of something.
Qualify and ship region landmark. Complementary landmark. Footer content information. Complementary landmark. And
so this makes it very easy for somebody with accessibility devices like a screen reader to be able to navigate the site. You start even doing the base level of things, and you're going to be better than 80 to 90% of the websites that exist.